Hi, this is Park Ranger John, and welcome to Travel Fuels Life.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Travel Fuels Life, the show where we share stories, tips, and inspiration to help you live a travel lifestyle. I'm your host, Drew Hanisch, and if you're planning a trip this summer to America's treasures, the national parks, wouldn't it be great if you could just bend the ear of a 20-year veteran of the Park Service? Well, look no further, because today I have on the phone someone that I had the privilege to chat with over lunch last year at TBEX at the travel conference, and it is Park Ranger John from up in Washington State. And I'm going to ask him all sorts of questions for you, including how we can get the most out of those $80 America the Beautiful passes. Also find out about how he uses the blog that he runs to create a more detailed itinerary for your park visits. And he might even convince me to get over my fear of bears. So for my home in Greenville, South Carolina, it is time to dial up John Tillison, also known as Park Ranger John. Hello, John. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
So, John, you've been a park ranger for 20 years. What inspired you to become a park ranger?
It's funny. I grew up, I was in scouts. I was always outdoors and stuff, and it never crossed my mind. And I remember, like a lot of young guys, get out of high school, they think they know the world, and I thought I'd get a job and, I would figure it out. But after a few years, I think it started to hit me that I need to figure something out in life. And because I wasn't going to work for, lower wage jobs all my life, I think I got that realization real quick. And then I remember one day this brochure came in and it said like natural resources, and it was for the community college, and it had like programs like wildlife biology, chainsaw operation, and fish identification, all this different. I was like, I never thought about this before. I was like, this is everything that I love. I was like, all this stuff is what I enjoy doing. So, I immediately signed up for the courses, and gosh, I never turned back. It's been like the best thing I ever did. It was like I found that thing,
Yeah, yeah. So did you go through college then, or were these just training courses apart from college?
It was actually what I took was a 2-year degree for natural resources management, and it had degrees in either like in forestry, parks and recreation, wildlife management, and in rangeland management. And it just stuck with me. And I always loved going to parks and doing stuff. And it just never crossed my mind. And as soon as I seen it, I knew what I wanted to do. It was just like the light bulb went off.
So how did you pursue actually going to work for one of the parks then, once that happened? Did you do things apart from and kind of build up a resume to get going, or did you just jump right in and say, here's a park, let me go apply and see if I can get the job?
First thing I did is I had jumped right into the college and started taking classes. And then I started looking around for jobs in the summertime, because once you get out of school, I was like, let me start getting some work experience in, which, I tell everybody this is, that wants to get into parks now, is that one of the best things you can do is get known. It's really competitive to become a park ranger, working in the outdoors positions. And most people, they request a 4-year degree minimum. Some of them want, even more. But I got in with 2 years of work experience and 2 years of education. And I think the 2 years of work experience was invaluable. I got to know people. I got to learn people. I got to learn the system and how it worked, and build a reputation for my name. Mm-hmm. And people ate that up. So, I had people, when I got done with my degree, they was like, as soon as you're done, I want to interview you. They were waiting for me because they knew my reputation.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's something that's invaluable. You really can't put a price tag on that.
So if somebody was trying to do that today, what would be the best route then? Is it, I mean, because to be able to get a college degree, I know from doing web design and looking at resumes coming across my desk, I always look for that experience side, but with a web designer, they can go and just start working on code here and start doing little projects here and there. How would somebody maybe try to get that experience these days?
I think the best thing to do is, if you're interested in a park, you could start off, by volunteering. You got volunteer groups. Most parks do have some kind of a volunteer group. It's a good way to get your name in and get known. A lot of them have every park I know of has summer employment, and it's really the good chance to get your hands dirty and really find out what is the operational part of the park. And if you can get down there and clean bathrooms for 8 hours a day and still have a smile on your face at the end of the day, that says a lot about your work character and stuff, and being able to get along with people. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for. Is I've hired a lot of people for seasonal employment over the years, and I always said that I hire attitudes and I train for skills. Because most of the work I did were, I'd say most things were trainable. There are some things I needed more skills with, but if you have a great attitude and it's somebody you can really work with and work with the public, that goes so much further. When I go to work, I want to have a good time too. And I always look for that as somebody with a great attitude.
So what were your primary duties then when you got into being a park ranger? What was your day-to-day like?
That's a pretty common question. And the hardest thing is there was no typical day. As a park ranger, I worked in Washington State for 20 years. And each place might be a little bit different, but my primary job duty was doing law enforcement and emergency response. So that was always my paramount thing. And sometimes you never know when that happens. You just get a call and you respond. Other times we do active patrols, especially for emphasis for problems you may have if you have speeding in a certain area, especially where children and people or families are playing. That's pretty important to make sure everybody's safe. But you would get medical emergencies, lost children, something like that. You would be instantly responding to that. But besides that, we also managed an entire park, and I always explained it like managing a city. We in the parks would have a sewer department. You have a sewer systems, water systems. We had computer reservations for people coming in for camping. You managed employees. Typical park, some of them has 80, 100 buildings. It depends on the size of park, and you've got, numerous employees, numerous volunteers, vehicles to maintain, so there was a lot happening at all the time. So if I wasn't responding to emergency, I might've been responding to a complaint, or it might've been going to help maintain some facilities, or checking in campers, or answering questions, or a little bit of everything. The good days I really got to do, I really enjoyed was doing interpretive programs and talking about the park and the history and stuff like that. Or got a chainsaw. It was different every day.
So when we meet somebody in the park and they're doing those interpretive programs, they don't just do that. They have a lot of other responsibilities that they take on.
There's a possibility. Now, some of the rangers that you'll meet in the visitor centers, that might be one of their primary tasks, but they may be also tasked with doing evening interpretive programs and stuff like that as well.
Okay. Well, good. Well, so now you're doing some work with Yosemite right now. What is, as a brand ambassador, what does that entail?
Well, Yosemite is a big park. They have 4 entrances. The south entrance is going through Madera County, and many people go through there. So I'm working with Madera County to talk not only about Madera County, but Yellowstone itself as well. And, and all the counties work together real well. And working with Yosemite National Park, tourism is a major component. And a common things I'm starting to see now is you'll come into a park and you'll see local breweries with beers themed with the national parks or wineries, or you've got several outfitters that does Zion, for example. They have outfitters for hiking the Narrows where they have boots and hiking poles, and Yosemite. They have some really great restaurants right outside. I mean, you got the town of Oakhurst is right outside. It's an easy location to go get some supplies. Bass Lake that's right next to it. And Bass Lake has a beautiful lake that most people know it from a 1980s movie, The Great Outdoors. It had John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. That cult movie that was filmed right there in right outside of Yosemite and Bass Lake. So there's a lot of that cool stuff surrounding that whole area.
So the park really kind of coordinates with that, or you're just kind of promoting the from the county side?
Well, I'm promoting from the county side, but the counties all get together. They have a big meeting quarterly, and they talk about the happenings in the park, and everybody kind of works together. I mean, and you almost have to. When you look at a park like Yosemite, it gets millions of visitors a year. It really is a coordinated effort. I mean, even with Yosemite having, about 1,000 campsites in the summertime and, several lodges. I mean, there's still so many people that come in. I mean, there's still a need for lodging outside the park and restaurants and supplies. And you can't do everything within the park.
I was going to say that's what fits me, because I'm not the guy who's going to be camping. Most likely I'm going to be looking for the nice hotel and kind of where can I put my feet up for the night and have the mint on the pillow.
And that's a growing population. It really is. I mean, if you're not in an RV, a lot of people do look for lodges now, and there's some really nice lodges. I love visiting the lodges within the parks, but they can be expensive to get into and not as near as many amenities, because many of the national park lodges, they were built 100 plus years ago. You're not going to find USB plugins in most,
right.
In most of your rooms, and they're keeping more of the historical factor to them, which is really amazing. Some people like to visit the lodges and not necessarily stay in the lodges.
Yeah.
And not all of those rooms are created equal. I can easily say that. I mean, I've been to some of the national park lodges that got a little bit of everything, to some where I was actually in one room we got at the last minute. It looked like a closet converted to a room, and it had a sink and a bed, and my feet were actually in the sink.
Oh, no.
I was laying in the bed. I mean, I'm 6'3", and my feet were hanging off in the sink. So,
can you imagine me at 6'6"?
Exactly, right. And then it had shared bathrooms in that area as well. So, I mean, not everybody's interested in that. They like their own conveniences in life.
Now, you live in Washington, but then you're working for Yosemite. How did they get to know you?
They got to know me through my website and through my wife. My wife also goes around and has been to a few conferences like TBEX, like we met at.
Uh-huh.
And I happened to run across Yosemite one day, and she was one of the speakers to this conference, and they heard that she had mentioned about my website and was very interested because of the national parks and me being park rangers. And it kind of just became a perfect combination that they actually hired both of us to come down quarterly, to come down and talk about Yosemite, talk about the different times of the year and things to do, and talk about the surrounding, of course they want to promote their county as well, which is great. And, and if you're flying in, it's a great spot, again, to get hotels, get something to eat, get, supplies that you may want to bring with you. So this is the chance for me to talk about my experiences of being in Madera County as well.
You have retired since from being a park ranger, and so you've got more time to be able to travel. Was Tammy Lee an influence for you in terms of taking up the idea of blogging?
She was a huge influence. I mean, my wife's been doing it for 10 years now, and probably made every mistake known to man doing it. I mean, anybody that's ever done blogging and done this kind of stuff can attest there's not like a college course to take on it or something. You just kind of figure it out on your own for a big portion. And so, I mean, I've benefited greatly from it. But we knew that right at 20 years, we knew that I had to where it was time to retire for me, and doing law enforcement, doing training. If anybody knows people, it's been in enforcement for years, and having two bad knees where I can't do. I mean, I wanted to have longevity outside of parks,
right?
And now it's my opportunity to go in. I still love parks, and I go to them. And now I'm talking about parks on my website. I mean, so it was something that, about year 18, 19, we started, me being in parks, we really started talking about. And we started getting a plan of what we wanted to do and a vision for it. And once we got that vision, we started going at it. And we just started our third year. February 14th was the day I started the blog. And that's it was just over 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're working at it harder than ever now. Last year, we visited over 70 national park sites of the 418 total sites that they manage. And we're well on that track again this year. We may even surpass it this year.
I bet it's helpful buddying up on these trips and being able to have somebody who's already got all of that experience, because she's probably got places that she needs to go or that she wants to go to. Do you kind of coordinate your trips together to say, hey, let's make sure that there's a national park or a park that we can visit somewhere nearby, whatever it is? Because she doesn't focus on parks herself, correct?
No. She has her own site. She talks about travel as well. We tend to try to work trips together whenever possible. So if she's going to be at a conference or she's going to be speaking at a conference or she's invited somewhere, I may go with her, and then afterwards we'll go hit some area parks in that area. So we try to work it together where we're both doing things together, which is great. I mean, I love spending time with my wife, and I was missing at it that when she started getting her blog really up and running, she was going 170, 180 days a year. And I was going to work still. So it was sad seeing my wife gone all the time. So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. Prior to you actually being a travel blogger, were you traveling very much, or were you pretty much just stuck at the park you were at and staying sort of in the Washington area?
I had to really pick and choose being, in parks. I mean, summertime was kind of our go-to time. So it wasn't really when she was on trips in the summer, unless it was something pretty amazing, I really didn't get time off. And then, I only had a set number of days anyway. So she was going for most of the trips by herself. And that's kind of tough when she's off and going to, all these exotic locations, and I'm just going, I'm going to work today.
Yeah. So your blog is actually very helpful. I went through and I was planning out my Four Corners trip and was looking at all of the Utah national parks. And so I got information on a couple of those. I got a lot of information on Zion, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for me to be able to go to Zion, because you gave so much good information that I thought, I can't just spend half a day at Zion. I need to make Zion a destination instead. So in terms of what you're trying to do with the blog and why you created the blog, what information are you trying to get in there to help people in terms of their planning?
Well, that's a really good question. I know that I love getting on the National Parks website and looking at stuff, but it can be very detailed. It's written by government. It's they've got certain platforms of what they're looking at. I found it very difficult to find certain things that I would be looking for sometimes, and I could spend hours, and then I would get there and not feel like I was completely prepared. So I'm really trying to come at it as a point of, I worked in parks for 20 years. I heard the common questions that were asked all the time. So I knew a lot of what basic things people were looking for. And I try to make that easy and easily accessible so people can plan their trip. I mean, if you're going to, like you said, Zion, I was like, here's 13 hikes. It's right there in the main portion of the park that you can come right out and do. And then I try to give photos for each one, the distance, the difficulty, and give a good description of the hike too. I talk about camping. I've in all of my articles that I've written, I've been to all these parks. It's not like I'm somewhere sitting in Washington, D.C. writing this article. I've been there. I've experienced it. And I'm coming from a perspective of not only a user, but as a ranger as well. So I try to make it easy for people. I mean, the common things I've seen camping would be the growing trend I'm seeing is RVs coming into parks. You know, there's still people use tents, but there's a growing population. And real common themes is, did they have hookup sites? And if they didn't, did they have could you use generators and what hours you could? And a real common theme I would see as well is, do you have a campground map? That's what everybody wants to know. And you can't find these things online. And I was like, well, if these are the most common things, why are those not easily found? And I try to make that the forefront of putting things on an article so people know today's thing. Everybody today wants to know if there's Wi-Fi in a campground. I mean, I don't know how many campgrounds you've been to. I've seen people with their laptop out, their iPad out, trying to FaceTime with their family and stuff like that. Yeah, especially in the summer times when you get burn bans on and stuff like that. And that's common questions. Do you have Wi-Fi available? That's one of the first questions almost every visitor had at Same Life in a campground.
Well, and what's funny is for a guy that travels like I do, I need Wi-Fi. And so I don't even really consider spending time at a national park because I plan out short trips to national parks where I spend half a day so that I can get back to the lodge to be able to get to Wi-Fi, and never really would consider going out camping and thinking that I would have the ability to have Wi-Fi. So that's interesting.
Right. And many of the parks do not have Wi-Fi. I mean, that's not a common thing. And cell service can be a real hit and miss too. So, but some people that live full time out of their RVs, they may want that. That's a real common thing. And some of them even want to know if they can get their satellite reception for their dish or direct TV.
Yeah. Oh my. Enjoy the outdoors, people.
Right.
Yeah.
But, it's funny that, the trend, especially with technology, and that's what people are looking for. And you can't find that information anywhere. And that's just camping. So that's where I tried to really interject and really try to give some of the real common questions that people have. And the other problem I really ran into too is that I seen that I would go to a park and I'd do all this research on the site, and then all of a sudden I'd hop at a park in Zion would be a good example. I'd hop up there or Yosemite and there's a shuttle bus. And I'm like, wait a sec, what's this shuttle bus thing? And now all of a sudden it kind of changes your plan for the day because you didn't know that you're supposed to take a shuttle bus into a canyon or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, I try to make it, where people are prepared when they come in. And, here's some really good highlights to see, a good trail, and kind of the focus on how to easily get around the park.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I read blogs, sometimes blogs are so detailed. I went to Chichen Itza in Mexico and I read a blog on it ahead of time, and there is helpful information, and then there's too much information. Sometimes there's stuff. I mean,
exactly.
I don't need to necessarily see a picture of every single thing that I'm going to view when I'm there, because then. It's still worth me going to see it in 3 dimensions, but in the end, you're kind of giving all the surprises. Like, for instance, when I went to Arches National Park and I rounded that corner and I saw what, you get that first glimpse of the arch, and it's like, wow, it all of a sudden becomes real. And if somebody were to, show that to me ahead of time and give too much of that away, it kind of pulls the surprise out. But yet you still want to get the kind of information like, get to Chichen Itza early, because if you get there at 11 o'clock, you're going to be inundated by tourists.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And I completely agree with that. I think about that when I post photos. Like, you had a great example at Arches there, going to Delicate Arch. If I had a video showing that going around the corner, it would like take away the excitement of that entire hike if I had that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that people should really experience for themselves. If I had that and that was already there, they've already hit that aha moment, and I don't want to ruin that either.
Yeah.
Because, that's pretty amazing. I've talked about in Zion, the Angel's Landing hike, and I'll take a photo. one of my favorite photos that's done really well is the bridge as you just start the hike.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'd done a video at the end of the hike, I've ruined the entire moment of that hike. And I don't want to do that. I want somebody to still experience that moment that I had that has just made it absolutely worth going.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Zion specifically right now, because part of what maybe kept me from wanting to go to Zion was that I hear that everybody goes to Zion and that Zion is really busy at times. Are you sensing with some of these parks that certain ones are kind of getting a little overused? They call it over tourism. Do you see that as an issue yet, or?
Oh, I started going to the national parks over 30 years ago. And I can tell you, I went to hikes and like arches in Zion. Mm-hmm. I'd be the only person on the trail. And now that's just unheard of. Mm. I mean, when you go up to Delicate Arch now in arches, you can look off at the distance and it almost looks like ants going up the hill. There's just so many people going up,
Right.
And rightfully so, it's been discovered. But you're right. Arches National Park's actually talking about a potential parking where you actually have to have a parking permit to get in. It's just, there's not enough parking. They've added parking. They can't keep up with the parking. There'll be a lineup to get into the park a mile down the road. It has become so popular. I think Zion last year had about 6 million visitors. Mm-hmm. Try to comprehend that. I think the island of Maui got 2.2 last year on the entire island. So
wow.
You can imagine, they're getting 3 times the visitors and they're trying to shove into one little canyon.
Yeah.
That's why you see parks like Grand Canyon has a shuttle. Bryce Canyon has a shuttle now. Zion does. Yosemite's had a shuttle for years. They're seeing such sheer numbers of people.
So is there something we can do as tourists to these areas, whether it be different time periods to visit or times of the day, or that to kind of ease this, or not be overrunning the place? Because I know we don't want to all be out in this majestic place with 10,000 other people as well, because that sort of ruins the experience as well.
It really does. And a really good example of that's Yellowstone. Yellowstone has about 6 million visitors a year. And granted, it's a big park, but most visitors come in 3 months, June, July, and August. And during that time, I think they get over 3/4 of their visitation in 3 months. Mm. So when you start adding that math up, there's a lot of people in a park in 3 months. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful, and that's when most people have time to go to it. It also becomes very challenging because when you have that many people, it's hard to find parking spots in parking lots. It's hard to even just get around. You'll find yourself only hitting a couple of highlights a day and frustrated with traffic when you're in the great outdoors, and that's disappointing.
Yeah.
But Yellowstone is a park that you can visit 12 months out of the year. Especially if you're not afraid of the snow. It's an incredible park. You get in those shoulder seasons of, like May and earlier, a little bit earlier in September later. There's still generally the weather's pretty good, mm-hmm. and you can beat a lot of the crowds just by coming out in those shoulder seasons.
I was going to say, in Arches, I found that by going out at 7 a.m. and getting there first thing, and it was off season. It was October, that I seemed to get out on that hike early enough that I think there were probably 20 people out at Delicate Arch by the time I got out there. So
exactly,
that was a nicer experience. Of course, now I was at sunrise, and I think sunset's probably the best time to look at Delicate Arch. I can imagine at sunset it's probably pretty busy.
Oh yes, it is. And if you get in during the full moon,
mm-hmm.
it's ridiculous. Social media has done some great things for parks, but it's also created some problems for parks. And Arches is one of those. How many people have seen the moon with Delicate Arch as
mm-hmm.
a photo? Once everybody's seen it, now you come out there on the night of a full moon, It doesn't matter if it's October, November, the campground's full. There's photographers everywhere, and they'll be chalking up across that back wall there.
Yeah.
And they'll be lined up, layers thick, hours in advance before sunset, trying to, stake their position to get that photo.
So if somebody wants to go out to a park and the only time they can travel is in the summertime, is there a danger that park may have to just say, that's it? There's only so many people that we can have in. You were talking about potentially having parking permits for arches. And if that's the case, how should people plan for making sure that when they have their day plan to go out to a particular park, that it's actually going to let them in?
If it is a park that is going to start requiring reservations, you have to secure one in advance or see if there's transportation in. Muir Woods, right out of San Francisco, Muir Woods National Monument. Mm-hmm. Now they have very few parking permits left. I mean, it has become so popular as well. I mean, it's got the huge redwood trees, and it's just stunning. And you're talking right outside of San Francisco, a huge population base, and that now they have a shuttle service in for, I think, about 8 months out of the year now. And you have to make reservations for that. So that's how popular it's got. It's not only will the reservations fill up for the parking lot, but it will for the shuttle as well. So if you show up, unless you want to hike about 20 miles to get to the park, you might not just get to go. And that's the downside of, just the amount of tourism that's just showing up.
So let's talk about some places that people aren't going, that they should be going, like those little hidden gem parks of the parks that you've been to. And I think you have listed 48 out of 61 national parks that you've been to. Which ones are we ignoring and we shouldn't be?
Typically the easier a park is to get to, or the grandeur of them, they're going to be busier. If you get one that's a little bit more off the beaten path, sometimes that little bit more effort to get somewhere gives you a bigger reward. And I've got an article coming out in the next couple of weeks that's going to have the least visited national parks in the system. And I think it's a great start. I think one park that really stands out to me as a phenomenal park is Wrangell St. Elias. It's the largest national park system up in Alaska. But to get up into there, most people have to fly into Alaska, get a rental car, and get up there. And it's an adventure to get there. But that's part of the appeal to it, is it is an adventure to get there. It's not something you're just going to fly to Las Vegas like you can to Zion, get a rental car easily in 2 hours, you're in a park. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a little bit more of an adventure for you. But at the same token, you got 6 million visitors in Zion, and probably a quarter of that, or a much less than a quarter, at Wrangell St. Elias.
So what would someone see there? Is this mountain viewing and landscapes? Is it wildlife? Is it hikes? What would you say that park is best known for?
Wrangell St. Elias, I mean, when you come in on the south end, you come in on the McCarthy Road, and it's probably about 60 miles in. You're going to see the epic beauty of Alaska. You're going to see the bogs. You're going to see all the wildlife. I mean, I can't tell you how much wildlife we've seen on this whole trip. I mean, it was just amazing. Then you end up to the main part of the park. You can go up into an old mining town that was up there, and there's actually a lodge up there in the park, and camping, and you got glaciers, and you can even do helicopter tours and all kinds of stuff.
So how far is this from, is it near Fairbanks? Is it north of Fairbanks? Is it, or Anchorage area, or whereabouts?
You can get in from Anchorage or Fairbanks, a little closer from Anchorage, but either way, it's going to promise to have just an amazing drive just to get to the park. I mean, Alaska is the great wide open still. They call it the last frontier for a reason. You can go miles and miles without seeing anything, and you're just already in nature before you even get to the park. And then the park just has epic, jaw-dropping views. But yeah, this is actually one of the parks in Alaska you can actually still drive to.
So now let's go beyond just the 61 national parks. You've actually have a page on your website where you have a checklist of all of the park sites.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 417 of those. And so for somebody trying to figure out what does that mean? Now, maybe when I was traveling out through Arizona, I went to Canyon de Chelly. Thank you for helping me know how to pronounce that, by the way. And that was called a national monument.
Correct.
So what is the difference between a national park and a national monument?
Yeah, that's another great question. I get asked that a lot. The national parks, I mean, they have the 418 sites are all managed under the national park system, but everybody tends to know the national park name. What it comes down to is a land use classification, and they'll look at a park and what is this being managed or used as? I mean, there's some that's called national seashores, and they're predominantly on the beach where you have more beach activities. So being labeled a national seashore, they have certain land classifications of things that needs to be done or managed more so as a beach, more so than it is like a national historic site. Like when you think of a Martin Luther King Jr. site in Atlanta that has, the home of Dr. Martin Luther King and, several other the buildings around there of historical significance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a historical park versus a historic site tends to be just one historical site, or as a historical park will have numerous buildings that it's managing. So it's more of a classification system. It doesn't mean that it's going to be any less important of a historic site. I mean, some of your most visited parks are not national parks. Some great examples is Statue of Liberty, managed by the National Park Service. That gets a lot of visitation. Alcatraz does. Anybody that's ever been to Alcatraz can tell you there's a lot of people that show up there, and it's day in and day out. So it's just how it's managed is what it comes down to.
Okay, because I noticed when I was at Canyon de Chelly that there were people selling things inside the park, which I'm not used to in a national park. Seeing, somebody selling beads or selling, it was a surprise to me. So is that one of those things that is kind of different in terms of the degree of management or what's allowed in that park?
It is, and Canyon de Chelly is really one of the odd creatures that's out there. It's a little bit different than most parks.
Mm-hmm.
Canyon de Chelly is mostly owned by private citizens, mostly the tribes within there, Native American. So when you see, while you was there, you may have noticed like Jeep tours in the canyon or horseback ride tours in the canyon.
Mm-hmm.
Those were all Native American run because that is all Native American land in there. The National Parks works with them to manage the area called Canyon de Chelly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not National Parks property to go down in there. That's all private land. The National Parks works with these guys to manage the area, though, to help protect all the resources. So that's where you get a little bit different, because these guys that are out selling things, they're actually out on their own property quite often. That they're just right next to the road or something, and they're on their own property selling something. So that's what's a little bit different about that park over a lot of others.
Yeah, that was a big surprise to me. And it did feel like you were on the edge of somebody's neighborhood at times when you were driving down the south edge of the canyon.
Yeah, it's real funny. I remember horses walking across the street, and it's people's horses.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about now people going out to parks. Me being somebody who I don't consider myself to be an outdoorsy type, but I absolutely love photography and landscapes. And I took a trip to Newfoundland many, many years ago where that just changed me from wanting to visit cities to wanting to see national parks and go look at wildlife and the rest. So, but there's a hesitation being not necessarily a city guy, but somebody who, probably feels a little less at home in nature. Let's talk about some of the things that I might want to pay attention to in terms of, how should I pack? What should I be preparing for in terms of my first trip to the outdoors? Can you give me some ideas?
Okay. That's a great, or another really great question. I mean, you don't have to come in and be the ultimate backpacker hiking in 20 miles and camping on whatever you're carrying in. That doesn't have to be your first trip. Get a taste of it. I mean, great examples like Yosemite would be a great park for a first time. I mean, somebody again could go fly into Fresno, come in and get a hotel like 20 minutes out of town and like a Bass Lake or an Oakhurst or something, and they have restaurants nearby, so they're feeling pretty comfortable. They don't have to bring a lot of stuff with them. The important thing then is to have some comfortable shoes. Depends on how much you're wanting to hike. You may want to, you being a photographer, I mean, this is a great example, is the great John Muir really spent a lot of time in Yosemite. And there's a John Muir photography studio right in the Yosemite Village. And they have actual photography classes and photography walks in the Yosemite itself that they lead. A great introduction I always recommend people is if you go to a visitor center and they have a video, a lot of times just going in and getting that video to start the day out, you get an idea of what the park is and why it was developed, and get a history behind it. Mm-hmm. And another great resource is when you're at the visitor center is there's generally a ranger there's there to answer questions. And you can ask them, hey, I just want to do a short, easy walk, or I may want to do an all-day hike, and they can judge there by a little bit of what your interest is too to help you plan your day. But not all parks you have to go out and do a full-day resource. Some people, like your National Historic Sites, might be more of their interest. It has more of a history background. I mean, people that like history and learning about, maybe they were interested in Lewis and Clark, and that story behind Lewis and Clark. They want to go to different sites based on Lewis and Clark and follow their voyage, or the Oregon Trail. I mean, how many of us remember growing up playing Oregon Trail on the computer,
Well, and it's funny you bring that up, because I'm actually planning my next trip to North Dakota, because it's the only state I haven't been to yet. And I was trying to figure out, I was trying to figure out stuff that I could do there. And first somebody said, well, if you're going to North Dakota, you got to do the Teddy Roosevelt National Park, because there's a Badlands there. And they said it's really cool to see. And then I saw all the Lewis and Clark stuff. So so it does look like there's stuff for me to do in North Dakota.
Absolutely.
So what would you suggest I do in North Dakota?
Now, I'm a big fan of Theodore Roosevelt. To me, he's my favorite president of all time. I mean, he's the big reason why we've got national park system today. The Fish and Wildlife, what is Fish and Wildlife today, he created that, Forest Service. I mean, he was very much the kind of an environmentalist president. I mean, him and Lyndon B. Johnson, both very much environmentalist presidents. So I'm a big fan of them. And that park is in honor of Theodore Roosevelt. And the Theodore Roosevelt National Park is where he really kind of fell in love with national parks. Gosh, he grew up in New York. His mom and his wife both died one after another. I mean, talk about a pretty rough, punch in the gut for a guy, to lose his wife and his mother in 2 days. I mean, that's a rough time. And he went out to the West, kind of trying to figure out his life again and stuff. And that's where he just, he worked at a ranch for a while, became a ranch hand, and kind of got his hands dirty, got the love of the outdoors, and got to really see that, that symbiotic relationship between humans and the outdoors, and really got to see the importance of it. And it led to him being out there where Theodore Roosevelt National Park was created. So, I mean, I think that's a fantastic place to go see. And you might go through South Dakota at the same token, which has Badlands and Mount Rushmore. And I mean, that whole area there is truly an amazing spot.
Yeah. I did a western trip where I drove all the way up through Rocky Mountain National Park. I don't know how I missed North Dakota.
Oh man,
I went all the way up to Banff in Canada, and somehow I just ended up. I guess Montana's so big, it's hard to get over to North Dakota from Montana.
It really is, and there's a couple of other historic sites there. I think there's a Knife River Indian Villages.
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting park. I mean, it's not going to be one that's going to take all day, maybe a few hours, but it definitely gave you an inside life of how Native Americans grew up and lived in an area. And, and it's very interesting for living in an area that gets so cold in the winter and how they adapted to things and learned to live on the land. I thought it was a very interesting part.
Okay, good. That's stuff to mark down. And, all right. So one other question that I'm going to ask you from my own perspective is that I am afraid of bears. I go with the I don't know if you ever read Walk in the Woods, Bill Bryson, but yeah, that's me. I'm not very keen on bears, and so I'd love to see one. I just don't want to see one that's like me and him alone in the woods. So talk about wildlife encounters, because for me this is always the tricky part about getting myself motivated to go and do a long hike somewhere. In terms of what happens if I have a mountain lion that comes up on me, or I mean, are these occurrences that happen, or is this just all in my imagination?
Well, you're talking to a guy who's been chased by a moose. I've walked in between two bear cubs in my life. So I mean, I get it. I mean, I naturally get a little bit more apprehensive when animals are bigger than me. I pay a little bit more attention, so I understand that. I think being prepared is the best thing you can do. You got to remember, and this is the way I tell people, is bears and moose and all these other animals, they're not like humans. They don't have a hospital to go to if they get injured. So they're just not out here looking for humans saying, you know what, I think I want to go attack this guy today and see what happens.
Right.
They're not interested in that. I mean, a bear's going around doing his thing for the day. They hibernate in the winter, so they have to collect all this food and energy to survive the winter each year. I mean, that's a natural thing. So when they're out doing their thing, they're just out doing their thing. Usually when you get a bear attack or an attack by an animal, is they're provoked. There's not too many animals that's just naturally just aggressive and just want to attack you. So the biggest thing, especially with bears, is making noise before you go, or when you're walking and hiking outdoors. They say wear bear bells. I've heard a lot of people say that. They can be loud, not loud. Buddy system's always great. You're always talking, whistling. So it's just knowing what to do there. I mean, preventing the problem from happening in the first place is the best thing you can do. A lot of places you go now that you're in bear country has bear spray. The stuff's effective. It really is.
Is it?
But you got to remember, if you've ever had pepper spray, it's not fun if it comes back on you. It's
okay.
Truly unenjoyable.
Yeah. All right.
So, we take a risk. I think you have a much higher risk every day when you get in your car and drive home and go home.
Okay.
I mean, quite honestly, a walk in the woods is much safer than getting on the highway. I mean, how many times do we see today that people are texting or talking on their phones and distracted driving? I mean, I even seen somebody one day using a laptop driving down the road.
Yeah. You'll have to go back and listen to my Tesla episode where he was on autopilot basically in his car. Maybe that's the future of driving, is we just won't pay any attention at all, and we'll just have to go to the woods and take a hike to actually pay attention to something that's not our phone.
Right.
So tell me, what do you have coming up for yourself? You mentioned that you've got some blog posts that you're working on right now. Do you have any trips coming up that you're excited about, that maybe some places you haven't been yet? I've
got a big trip coming up here right around the 1st of March. It's we're going to be flying in Atlanta, and we're going to be actually hitting some of the Civil War sites, Civil War battlefields, as well as civil rights historic sites like Martin Luther King Jr. historic site in Atlanta. Looking at going at, I know a couple of them are still kind of in development with in Birmingham, the civil rights, and the Freedom Riders in Anniston, Alabama. All have really important stories to talk about for civil rights. Some of the national battlefields like Chickamauga, Shiloh, are big battles for the Civil War. I mean, talk about, some crazy history in American history right there. I mean, we can probably all look back and have some kind of trace of families fought on one side or the other, or even both sides in the Civil War. And that's part of what I eventually, as I've continued to build out my coverage on the parks, is being able to talk more about the stories that they really do a great job of talking about. And we're going to end up down in Gulf Shores for a few days. Interested, and I don't talk just about national parks. I'll talk about some of the big state parks too. And that's what I'm really excited to talk about is the new lodge they have for one of the Alabama state parks right there on Gulf Shores. And they have a really nice Gulf State Park down here. I want to talk a little bit about there as well. Then we're going to make our way back up towards Missouri and visit the new national park for me, and that's the Gateway Arch. Ah. So that's going to be a new site for me as well.
Okay.
So, I'm continuing to build out that coverage, and I'm trying to visit as many sites as I can. Again, when I talk about a site on my blog, I don't want it just to be, I looked at it in a book and, puked out the same information somebody else did. I want it to come from, a genuine spot, being somebody that worked in parks for years and as a visitor. So people get that experience.
Well, when you're ready for South Carolina, you let me know, because we have tons of Revolutionary War history around this state. I've done some tours from Camden and up to Cowpens and Waxhaws,
cool.
which is, so I mean, I've been out to all of those different sites. So when you're ready, we could chat about that.
I might be calling you up, because I've been to Congregate. That's a really cool park.
Mm-hmm.
And is it 96? I think.
Yeah, 96.
96.
I love. Yeah, you know what I love about 96? Yeah, have you been to 96?
I have.
I was going to say, what I love about 96 is that you see this picture in the visitor center of Nathaniel Greene, my favorite American Revolutionary War general, riding up on his steed like Napoleon. And then when you go out to the site, you're like, where was he riding that horse? What hill was he riding over?
And that's a really cool hike there at that park too, where it walks around and shows you all about the battle and how it happened and everything. That was a really cool walk.
Oh, it was. It is such a different experience than you ever would have imagined a battle would have gone. I mean, it is truly a unique,
I know.
Yeah. So hopefully now we're going to have tourists overrunning 96, because we got their curiosity up. They're like, what are they talking about?
Exactly.
Well, good. So we know your website, which is parkrangerjohn.com. And how else can people keep up with the stuff that you're doing?
I have stuff going out on Facebook all the time. I have an Instagram account, got Twitter. That's my big avenues of looking out. Oh, as well as Pinterest too. I put a lot of images on Pinterest. People really enjoy that as well. So,
well, I'm sure people are going to find a lot of inspirational information out there on all of your social media resources, and also on parkrangerjohn.com. And I know I've already found some great stuff off of that. And I hope this is going to be a great resource for people who've been listening to the show, who are going to jump out there and start doing some planning of some national park trips for this spring and this summer, because there is so much out there to see, and hopefully the information you give will help them get there at the right time and doing the right activities and getting the most out of those parks. So I really appreciate, even from my own standpoint, fantastic information that I've read on there so far, and I can't wait to see more information as you start posting it with the new parks that you go to.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. I hope it's of great use for some people.
And there closes out another week of Travel Fuels Life. Hope you got some great information out of this episode. And make sure to head to the show notes page at travelfuelslife.com/podcasts. Look for episode number 14, and there you will find some quick links to all of those national parks that we talked about during the show, those profiles that John has put together. And we also have links to his social media accounts and tips on how to become a park ranger. So check that out. And I also put a link to where we can get you some more information about that $80 America the Beautiful Pass, which I highly recommend. And I think I went to 3 parks this year before. That was totally paid for, and every other park after that was basically free. So it's a great value if you're planning on visiting more than just a couple of parks this year. If you want to keep up with me, make sure that you like and follow me on Facebook.com/TravelFuelsLife or Instagram.com/TravelFuelsLife. I am constantly posting pictures of the great places I travel to, and I hope I can inspire you to hit the road as well. And until next time, have a great week, safe travels, and thanks for listening to Travel Fuels Life.